What's up, guys? I'm BTC. Blizzard is talking about removing Scatter Arrow from Hanzo entirely and replacing it with something completely different. Just recently, Jeff Kaplan was talking about some of the hero balance changes, and I went over a lot of that stuff in my video earlier today, but I kind of wanted to come back a little bit and talk specifically about Hanzo, because he did mention that they're looking at rebalancing the Scatter Arrow, or they might end up completely removing it from the game and simply replacing it with something else. So what exactly is wrong with Hanzo? Well, since the game has been released, he's always had one of the lowest pick rates of all the characters. He is essentially a bad version of Widowmaker. While Widowmaker has recently seen a quick surge in order to counterplay Mercy, Hanzo has still just not been touched. He's still just left in the dust and nobody uses him, because Widow is just that much more effective at getting those long-range eliminations on Mercy. Another problem is that he has kind of limited mobility. Now, he can climb walls and stuff, which is better than a lot of characters, but he doesn't really have any escape utility. So if someone dives onto a Widow, for example, she can just grapple away. But if someone dives onto Hanzo, there's really not much he can do to try to escape. He really has to land that scatter in order to get rid of his attacker. If he can't do that, then he's just toast. Now, on top of this, he's also a long-range projectile-based character. And in case you don't know, Hit Scan is really good at long range, Projectile not so good at long range. It doesn't mean that it's completely worthless, it just means it's not really as good. So really, in order for Hanzo to be effective, he needs to kind of be left alone. If he's contested in really any way, then he just can't do anything that he needs to get done. All of this added together is why Hanzo has been permanently off meta. There's only a couple of characters in the game that have never been in the meta at all, and Hanzo is one of them. He just doesn't have the stuff that he needs to in order to really be effective in Overwatch. Now, of course, in contrast to all of that is the Scatter Arrow, one of, if not the best attacking ability in the entire game. It can one-shot an Orisa, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But Jeff Kaplan did bring this up, and he talked about how an Orisa player can get really frustrated by being at full health and then just instantly done because of a random Scatter Arrow. And it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to give a character an ability that can one-shot a tank on practically the other side of the map and have absolutely no risk to it. It's all reward. Jeff Kaplan also said that they have a couple of different alternatives to Scatter Arrow that they're working on. And from the way he was talking, I think they're probably going to go with something different, as opposed to just kind of like messing around with the damage on the Scatter Arrow. Because the thing is, if you were to lower the damage on the Scatter Arrow, it would just make playing Hanzo all that much worse. So that isn't really a solution. There's a couple of different ways they could do this. They could basically just change it into a different type of damaging ability. The thing that I immediately thought of was something that I've seen in World of Warcraft and Dota and some other games. It would be some sort of chained damage ability. So Hanzo would fire off an arrow, it would hit the first target and do full damage, like let's say 100, and then it would kind of jump or chain to a nearby target and do like 75 damage. And then it would jump and chain to another target and do 50. And then you could have it even go to a fourth and have it do 25 or something like that. Another possible version would be, instead of chaining from one target to the next and then to another, you could have it so that when it hits that first target, it then instantly chains to everything that's in the area. So rather than going 1-1-1, it would just jump to all of the stuff that's in the area. I think if you did that, you would probably have to reduce the secondary damage though, otherwise it would just be way too strong. However, I think the best solution would be to replace Scatter Arrow with something that isn't purely damage, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One, if you gave him an ability that had some sort of crowd control or something, I'm thinking, imagine firing off an arrow and then it spreads out into a net, and then it, goes around the enemy and it kind of traps them there for a little bit. It wouldn't be a stun, it would probably be more like an immobilization, kind of like when you get stuck in Junkrat's trap, because I think a stun would be way, way too strong. We already have a couple of stuns in the game, but they're very kind of limited because of how powerful a stun actually is. McCree has a stun, but it's less than a second. Reinhardt has a stun, but it's his ultimate, so it's kind of an exception. And then, of course, Mei has a stun, which is her freeze, but you have to kind of, build up to it. So giving Hanzo, just a long-range instant stun would probably be really bad. So instead, maybe if it was like an immobilize or something like Junkrat's Trap, I think that would be a lot better. An ability like this would also increase Hanzo's survivability, because before, when he gets dived, basically right now you have to land that scatter shot and you have to take them out immediately. If you miss, then you're pretty much done. But if you had some sort of that net arrow deal, I think it would be a lot easier to hit them with that than it would be with the scatter arrow. And if you kind of lock them down for 4 or 5 seconds, it's going to give Hanzo the time he needs to then get away and move towards his team or to get to a higher elevation. Or what he could do is he could then just, attack the guy while he's in the net. Now, if you're wondering, well, what would be the difference between this and what McCree has? Wouldn't it just be stronger? And the answer is no, it wouldn't, because McCree has a stun, whereas the net would just be an immobilize, meaning they can still attack you, they just can't move. It would also be a little bit of variety to the whole immobilization concept, because while the Junkrat trap forces people to actually walk into it in order for it to activate, Hanzo could be a little bit more proactive and he could actually target somebody, because, that's kind of his job, right? He's supposed to target the enemies and then deal with them. So if he's able to target somebody and then put them in this little net trap thing, I think that would actually be pretty good. Now, it doesn't mean that it does no damage. It would probably do a little bit. But that brings into another thing, which is, well, if you remove all of that scatter arrow damage and you give him some sort of utility, what you can then do is you can actually buff his regular attack. You can increase the speed of the arrows, you could increase his fire rate, you could increase the damage. There's a bunch of different things. If you take away that huge chunk of damage from the scatter arrow, then what you can do is make that normal attack better, and that will, of course, bring up the skill ceiling of the character. So really, what I think they should do is get away from just giving him another different kind of damaging ability, because he has the best damage ability in the game, and it's not enough to actually balance the character and make him viable. So give him something else, give him some sort of utility, and then you can also buff his regular attacks in order to kind of balance all that sort of stuff out. But what do you guys think they're going to give him for a replacement ability? Put your ideas down in the comments below. Also, don't forget to check out my Discord server. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. The links are down below. Thanks for watching. Remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault. Also, special thanks to all my Patreon supporters for helping to make this all possible. If you'd like to see what kind of cool rewards you can get for supporting the channel, check the links on screen and down below.